next speaker will be Kevin Jones, Social Capital Markets, the founder. And he will give a presentation about the market, how it develops, and also present some ideas about next conference in Malmö, 8th to 10th of May. And also we can have a small discussion, and you have an opportunity to ask him some questions in the end. So, the floors are yours.
Thank you, Bertola. Bertola is our Swedish partner helping us round up the content and introducing us to people for our conference. So our conference is called socialcapitalmarkets.net. And we call ourselves the market at the intersection of money and meaning. This is the picture that we used this past conference. We had one in San Francisco. It was our 5th conference. We started in 2008. But we asked people this question: money plus meaning, what does it mean to you? What is your answer? Money has been about investing. And giving has been about meaning, or grants have been about meaning. But we created a marketplace for where money is put toward higher goals than just pure profit. And so we've had that conference in San Francisco. We had one in September, and we had 1,400 people come from 56 countries. There were more than 30 Swedes who came to, I guess, our European conference, which was in Amsterdam in May. And so what we do is we gather the investors who are learning to invest and put new money towards social enterprise, towards solving the problems of the world. And we gather the social entrepreneurs who want to be funded. And we had social entrepreneurs from about 40 of those countries. Some were Europeans. We had actually an exhibit at our SOCAP Europe conference in Amsterdam of some folks from the university in Gothenburg who have built a vehicle that is low cost in Ghana that you can sell and carry goods to market, not on a horse or a donkey, but low cost, and get your goods to market and make money at that. And so those folks exhibited. So what are we talking about? We're talking about changing the world, and we're a movement of people changing the world. And we're related in our thinking and our ethos to the folks doing Occupy Wall Street, who are saying the traditional capital markets are broken in many deep ways because they exist for themselves and for the people with money, and they're not for the 99%. When you talk to people in Sweden, they don't really resonate with the movement of Occupy Wall Street because people believe in institutions here in a way that we don't in the US. But we are about moving money to good. And when we started about 4+ years ago, we named our conference intentionally, but at an intersection. We are about social capital, the non-financial ties between people, between communities, and we're about the capital markets. And true zealots and fundamentalists in the capital markets thought that using the word social was not what you should do with the capital markets. The market should be about investing and making money. And the social capital people said, how can the markets be used for good? They were often anti-capitalist fundamentalists, movement folks. And we bring together a movement of people using business to try to change the world, and people who are investing in those new businesses. We also bring together philanthropists, foundations, givers, and then aid agencies. We've had people from USAID, the World Bank, et cetera, associated with this stuff. And it's a large movement. We had 1,500 people from 56 countries come to our conference in the US, in San Francisco, and that was our 3rd one in the US. But we did our first European conference in May in Amsterdam. And the reason we came to Amsterdam was because that's where the capital markets were formed. That's where the first stock market was created. It was in Amsterdam. And it was just a means to be able to trust people you hadn't met. There was a tool for the people who were in the spice trade to be able to trust people you hadn't met and to share risk. And that's what the tool was about. It grew out of coffee houses. And so we went back to the Bourse, the place where they created the stock market. And we did it because there was a powerful message and a metaphor. because we said, look, the market is not a force of nature that pushes us around. We are not the tools of the market, of the stock market or of the financial market, but it's our tool. In fact, we created it here in this room. So it's gotten a little out of control and it's pushing us around, but it's time to take control of the market and use it. And the market isn't the answer for everything. Business isn't the answer for everything. There are true market failures. I worked in malaria in Swaziland and Mozambique for a couple of years, and that's a total market failure. The women who get malaria and the kids 1 to 5 who die cannot afford insecticide-treated nets, and they can't afford the drugs, so they need to be subsidized. So we're not coming here as market fundamentalists saying the market's the answer for everything, but the market has to be an answer. The same way government is an answer, the same way people giving is an answer, the same way, you know, the woman with the Uganda project who just spoke it has an answer for that. And so philanthropy is not, it's not that philanthropy is inefficient, and it's not that government is inefficient, it's that alone they're insufficient. There's more money in the market than there is outside of the market, and it can be put to use, and you have to just change the way you think about money in order to do that. And so to enable people to do that, we bring them together and we help startups form, and we get startups funded, and we help larger companies get funded to get growth capital. But this is a movement, and it's a big movement. There's about 190 million, yeah. So you do the math, and so it's 120 billion. It's been sized by JP Morgan and other folks at about 120 billion that wants to move this way. If you poll people, they say they want to put their money where their heart is and not just where the financial return is. But to do that, you have to think differently. The old way of thinking about investing is I invest for me and I give for good. And we created this market to create a space between giving from whatever source, from a foundation, from an individual, from a government, and investing. There is this space in between. And when we started about 4 years ago, many people thought that that was not true, that that was not possible, that we had to do it the way we had inherited. But it was just an old myth. And it's a myth that's not good for the planet. It's a myth that's not good for the people. And we're part of a lot of movements around this that are trying to create a new myth, because the old myth is raping the planet, and if we had an infinite number of planets, it would probably be a good idea. But we don't. We have one. We at SOCAP are working with the folks at the Stockholm Resilience Center on a project to see if small businesses can do a better job of cleaning the environment, of ecosystem services, than NGOs and governments. And we think that and working with the EU on that. And so we're bringing together those groups, the young people often who want to change the world, the baby boomers who want a better legacy, sometimes Gen Xers who are finding a way to get out of being stuck with mortgages and paying for kids. But it's often the millennials and the baby boomers combining together in these startups. And so what are these startups? Well, let me talk about a couple of them. A company named Simpa formed at SOCAP in 2009 in San Francisco. And there's a great and emerging opportunity in rural, locally produced solar power that can work in rural India and rural Africa. In India alone, that market has been sized at $6.5 billion, and some of it is in generation, some of it is in storage, some of it is in distribution. But one of the and so what you do with solar in a rural African village is an amazing thing. You often take out kerosene. And kerosene, along with cook stoves, kills 1.5 million people by indoor air pollution every year. It's just the fumes and the cook stoves are deadly. So you take out the kerosene that they're paying for, but you save 30% on their energy costs by putting up solar panels with LED lights that go inside. And then one of the other things you do, this is a scene at our conference. These are people from, like I said, half 100 countries coming together to learn from each other, share from each other, invest in each other, and partner with each other. So in this hut, you also democratize light, and that's a pretty interesting thing. In some of the places in Kenya, one company that we work with called STEMA had discovered that often light would only have enough kerosene for 90 minutes a day. So that meant the firstborn son, got to do his homework watched by the father. That was a gift from the father that was also deadly. But when you put in solar, then light becomes democratized, and the girls and the mother and everyone gets light at 30% reduction in their energy costs. But then you have the problem of payment. And that's where SIMPA comes in. These people can't afford to buy the solar panels, and they can't afford the LED lights. But they can pay for them by time, just like you pay for a utility. So they can buy it by the month. And so SIMPA has a little mobile chip inside the solar panel that goes to a payment, and then it turns on your lights, or if you don't pay it, you don't get the lights. But they can pay it by the month. They can't pay the $400 in most places. They can't pay the capital cost of the solar panels. But what they pay by the month is 30% less than they are paying. So it's a good business, but it is taking out something that's deadly and democratizing light. And so SIMPA formed when they realized that the technology worked, and there was a huge market opportunity. I mean, one of the deforestation has caused solar to be a better opportunity in sub-Saharan Africa, which is, there's a bad side and a good side to that. That solar really works. So it makes sense from a business sense to put in something that saves 30% on the existing cost of a customer, but you have them for life, and you're also helping save lives by doing it. But they can't pay for it. So what they can pay for is essentially using a mobile that goes up to a tower and then goes down to a payment facility, and they can pay, the $20 a month or so, which is 30% less than they were paying for going and buying the kerosene. And so that company, the people realized that was the answer to unlock a lot of, and they have a lot of competitors now who are doing mobile payments for solar panels and LED lights in rural Africa and in rural India as well. And so these are off the grid. The grid doesn't go within 50 miles of a lot of these villages, but they have solar power now, and they have lights, and then they can also have heat with these kinds of things. And so that company, the people realized that was the opportunity. They got the technologists together at SOCAP 2009. They got funded at SOCAP 2010, and actually they got more funding at our last conference. So the investors come together with the entrepreneurs, and they figure out how it makes sense. And one of the interesting things that makes solar and rural different than microfinance and less morally risky than microfinance is that it's rural and it's isolated. So one of the problems with microfinance, do you guys know what microfinance is? Small loans often to women in developing world. Well, because it was just about the debt, it could then be securitized and then be turned into a derivative in the capital markets. And so some of those got to a point of really profiteering because they didn't limit their return on equity. So it ended up that they're paying less to microfinance institutions, but still paying way too much and profiteering. But one of the things that keeps that from happening with solar is that it's rural and isolated. And that means the rules are different everywhere. So you have to have a lot of anthropology along with the technology to make it work. You have to find out who are the local people that you can trust to install the solar panels and to repair them and do collection. So you have to, and that's different in each language group, that's different in each tribe. The rules that work in one place don't work in another. That's why rural and isolated remove some of the moral risk around some of this new technology. Some of the things around medical technology are the same kind of thing. And so what we're presenting to folks is a market opportunity. The market opportunity, as I said, in rural India is $6.5 billion around this market. That's how big the market can be based on the cost of the technology and what people can pay and where it's needed and where doing locally created power makes sense from a business standpoint and from a technology standpoint and from a moral standpoint. And one of the other things that's happening is that when they do have the solar, they're also not cutting down trees for light or for heat. And so it does a great thing for global warming at the same time. It does a great thing for climate change at the same time. It also, and some of these folks with the solar also work with biochar and do reforestation with some of the money that's left over. So it's a really different market. A typical investing decision is based on essentially two principles: risk and return. How risky is it, and how much can we make? So there's an efficient frontier curve that people often show. Well, the social capital markets, or what it's called impact investing, adds this third dimension that changes everything. It moves from the two-dimensional thing of how much money can I get, and what's my risk, and how much can I make, to what's my impact in the world. And by adding that other dimension of impact, by adding the dimension of meaning, you don't just add another dimension. You are in another dimension. So it changes people. Typical investors who come into the space find themselves changed. They're looking at things that they didn't used to look at. They're thinking, they learn to start thinking about themselves in a different way, because they're making different decisions, and they're adding this other dimension of meaning. What am I doing for the environment, and what am I doing for the people? Suddenly it makes them more three-dimensional rather than two-dimensional. Investing has been two-dimensional, risk and return, 2 dimensions. Risk, return, and impact is in 3 dimensions. And so these people become more of who they really used to be before they were MBAs, linear spreadsheet thinking. Impact doesn't really fit on a spreadsheet. But people do measure the impact, and it's important to know how much good you're doing and what are the unintended consequences. So we're part of a lot of groups that are building this other movement that says capital is just a tool, and it's not the determining factor. It doesn't rule the world. It's a tool to create the world that we need, a world that we need that works with global warming, that works with climate change, that works with migration. And there are a lot of funds working on immigration issues. That's actually a place where the U.S. is the leader, because our social safety net has been broken for a long time. And so we've had special venture funds focused on how to hire and train and culturally acclimate immigrants of different populations and things like that. And so we're actually the world's leader in that, just because our social safety net has been broken longer than most of the developing countries. So it's a place where our social brokenness has led to a particular expertise. So we do these conferences, and people are hungry for it. It's an interesting thing. Our first international conference was in Amsterdam, and we went there to make a point that the market is not a force of nature, it's a tool. We created it, and we can recreate it. So things like the Occupy Wall Street movement really work to our benefit. More people realize that our economic system is morally and economically bankrupt, and we're part of a group of people creating a new system using some of those same tools, but not the same myths that surround those tools. We're changing the myths around money. There is a space between giving and investing. It's a market, and new things happen in a market. So as we had a lot of demand, and there are people who wanted to do, we've had demand from SOCAP Dubai, SOCAP Lebanon, SOCAP Paris, SOCAP London. They want to bring the conference there because it helps catalyze local entrepreneurs. It helps validate the market for a country or a place that wants to do some of those kinds of things. And it worked really well. In Amsterdam, we had 650 people, but all the social entrepreneurs felt strengthened by seeing their peers from around the world. Investors got to know them. Some companies got invested in. But then when it's a movement, you succeed when you change the way people think and act. And that's really what we're about. We're a movement, but we show up as an asset class. There's $120 billion in latent demand that's been identified by researchers that wants to move this way. And so we work with the few seed funders that are out there funding early stage social entrepreneurs and try to accelerate that. We have a hub, there's one in Stockholm. There's a network of these co-working spaces. We have the largest one in the network. We've just crossed 1,000 members in our hub in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And the hubs are these co-working spaces where if you have a grand plan to change the world, no one laughs at you. That's one of the big things. We call it where change goes to work. Everybody works closer together, and they're sharing with each other. And if you're a nonprofit, but you have earned income, if you have a way to not get just grants, but you sell a product and service, you don't have to explain all that inside the hub. You're working with people who are doing that. If you have a for-profit, and you say, I'm a for-profit, but that's how it works best, and we're really, the purpose of our business is something like SIMPA, where we want to democratize lighting and take out a deadly force, but we can do it best by using the market, because the market is more efficient than philanthropy. It's more reliable. Philanthropists and government grants run out. They get tired of you, they want some new project. If you're actually delivering a good product and a service, and the market is the answer, it's much more reliable, much more sustainable economically over the long term. So we do hubs where change goes to work. There's a huge dynamism around the Bay Area, around Silicon Valley, because people do come there to be somebody different and to try things they couldn't do back home. And so, but we decided to come to Sweden for a kind of interesting reason. I think we've proved that this market is real, and it's big, and it's growing. My goal in starting SOCAP was just to show that this was real, it was big, it was growing. There really is a space between giving and investing where investors can make money and they can have positive impact. One of the best phrases for that is blended value. It's a phrase made up by my friend Jed Emerson, but some things show up as financial value on the balance sheet. Some things show up as cultural value, as social value. Those are all things you value. You would put money toward the things that are the good community in which your children live, your roads and things. You would pay for them by taxes, by fees. You would give to them, and you would gladly invest your money and hopes in them. So that's a blended value. Some of the value of these businesses shows up on the balance sheet, and investors make money. They might make less money because the people that they're investing in have less money. In some cases, like with solar in Africa and India, it's actually purely a market rate because the technology is so much cheaper than kerosene. So, but you can be impact first, impact investors, and that's what you're really after. And you work on things like hunger issues are not going to be market rate. Fair trade and those kinds of things are not going to be market rate. Some technology things like solar will be market rate, and that's return first, impact investing. There's a spectrum. You can go from giving to venture philanthropy to nonprofit loan funds to equity that makes some less return but has a catalytic impact to market rate, like the solar opportunity or a similar opportunity around medical technology, mostly in urban areas, just because if you put in some diagnostic machinery around kidney failure and things like that, it makes huge money in India because it makes the people healthier, and there's enough people to run through this much cheaper technology, and it's a market opportunity. But it's not about the money. The money is a tool in this market at the intersection of money and meaning. So again, why Sweden? Well, I met Bertolo a couple years ago. My friend here is the great connector. And he showed me the biosphere reserve around Lake Vanaran. And I was told by the folks that Lake Vanaran was deeply polluted 20 years ago. And then they said, then they realized the problem and they fixed it, and now you can drink out of it. And the economic challenges are the west side of the lake is competing in value-added caviar products with the east side of the lake, and I did drink out of it. But I asked my Swedish host, I said, so it was deeply polluted, so maybe $100 million, maybe more than that in sunk cost of industry that is making money polluting, and they just hadn't thought about it. The effluent was going into the lake. So what was that fight like? I mean, how did the environmentalists fight with the government and business fight with the environmentalists? What was that fight like? And they looked at me oddly and they said, we realized the problem and we solved it. And it's like, you mean there wasn't an us and them? There wasn't a fight? You government and business and society and environmentalists realized the problem collectively and solved it? And he said, well, yes. I mean, why wouldn't you? And as an American, coming from our gridlock, that was really new to me. And so I think the social capital markets, the social contract in Sweden, while I think you folks are not as boasting as we would be in America about that. It's something fairly unique. The way you gather together and figure out how to solve a problem and realize the problem and solve it is something different. And so I think one of the things we've proved with the social capital market and with this impact investing is that it is real, it is big, and it's growing, and we know how to do it. We know what works. But to grow it on a larger scale, we need to figure out how to cooperate together, how to not be at loggerheads, and how to partner for greater effect. And so that's why we're having our conference, not in London and not in Paris. We're doing a one-day event in Paris, but not the big event in Paris. That's why we're not doing Dubai. That's why we're not doing Singapore. All the other folks who have asked us, Ecuador, they weren't high on the list, but it was fun to think about it. But we come to Sweden because it's the social capital part of it that I think people need to understand. The way that Sweden cooperates and has a social contract that allows you to realize a problem and solve it is why we're coming to Malmo, and our conference is called SoCap Europe, Designing the Future. And so one of the things that is, when you're thinking about designing the future, you might not do it in Somalia because it's hard to think about the present, and it's hard to think about all the things that have to be done to get you back up the ladder. But in a place like Sweden, not many things are broken, and so you can think about the future, and you can think about what needs to be done together, using our money for good effect, to create the world that we need for the future, using capital as a tool, along with subsidies and governments and investing. And so that's why we're coming here. That's why we're on a tour of other Nordic and Scandinavian countries. We're going, the group of us are going to meet with folks doing this in Oslo, folks doing this in Helsinki, folks doing this in Copenhagen, of course in Malmo here, and then in Stockholm over the next couple weeks. And we hope people come. I think people will. We have a history of having bigger events each time because this movement is growing, and the proof points that it really works. The companies like Simpa, or I can talk about a lot of other companies, but the companies that are using the market to create positive change in the world and offer a positive blended value return to investors are growing. And so if you're interested in changing the world, please come and join us in Malmo, May 8th through 10th. I think you will find it interesting. I think you'll find people who are changing the world that you'd like to be around and learn from, and they can learn from you this spring. So, thank you.
Could it, a little bit about the teams?
What? Oh yeah. So we are having multiple themes that we're looking at. So inclusion is one, and that's both looking at youth unemployment, across Europe, here in Sweden, but other places, and then immigrant economic and social integration. So inclusion, and then healthcare inclusion, making sure healthcare works for the elderly, but making sure all the services reach all the people and seeing how the market can do that. And then public-private partnerships and where they work and where they don't work. And then how to scale social enterprise. And then working with our friends at the Stockholm Resilience Center on a biosphere economy, a market that lives within planetary boundaries. And they're the deep scientists, but we want to see how their thinking can be applied to investment as a way to say, does an investment make sense? And so we're excited to work with those folks, Johan Rockström and Carl Folke and all those folks. So it'll be about the environment making sense for people on the planet, working with the Stockholm Resilience Center, inclusion, which is youth unemployment and immigration, and looking at what the market can do around those issues where government is not able to solve those kinds of problems, and then around healthcare. And then public-private partnerships. We're bringing in a lot of, the UK is, England specifically, is probably the leader in this market in Europe. And so we're bringing in the people behind Nesta and behind the Big Society Bank, which will be the biggest force for investing, for impact investing in Europe. And they're taking, more than $1 billion in latent accounts and turning it into a capital pool to fuel social enterprise, and then social impact bonds that change change the whole way that services are delivered. And you only get paid if you do things like eliminate recidivism in an area, where you eliminate people going back to prison. So it's changing the incentives around public policy usage. So we'll be looking at a lot of the things that are working in the UK and some of the things that are broken in the UK as well. But they've been doing this a little bit longer, and I think they have some lessons for the rest of Europe that we'll be looking at. So any questions or anything else?
Okay, then we take lunch, I think.
Okay.
I think it's
Thank you.
But first we have to say thank you to Kevin, and it's a book from Berkman and from the inside.
Okay.
So, okay.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks.